Welcome to the Dark Nook Monster Shop. I make monsters here. Come down to the lab, see what's on the slab.
Hello everybody. Hopefully, by the time this video is up, the Dark Nook Monster Shop will have hit 10,000 subscribers. I just want to take a second and thank everybody who has subscribed and helped the channel grow. Keep coming back and I'll keep making monsters. So, this project was a test of my skin making method using the frayed yarn and foam clay. But at this point, I have no idea what monster I'm making. Again, I just start by cutting up a foam ball, throwing some wires into it for legs, gluing on some bits of foam here and there for a head. I just hit that body with a heat gun and smooth and harden the foam, just melting it slightly. Then I pull apart a bunch of bits of red and blue and purple yarn until it's down to the tiny threads. Next, I make the clay skin by just smushing all the yarn bits into the foam clay and working the threads into it like kneading dough. Then I flatten it out nice and thin and apply it to the foam. At this stage, it's a great creepy looking skin, but it's very subtle. The vein effect isn't real clear on camera. It looks cool in person though, for sure. And it was at this point, when I started making this big goofy smile, that I started thinking, yeah, this should be Patrick Star. And then I realized, hey, Patrick Star, sweet, no hands, because hands are hard. And this isn't a hand making test, it's a creepy zombie skin test. So, creepy zombie Patrick Star. Perfect. And then I realized, hey, wait a second. Starfish eat sea sponges. So, zombie Patrick needs to be eating SpongeBob. I make sure to add a little wire to reinforce his arms so I can have him holding some SpongeBob chunks later on. But because it's all foam, it's super lightweight anyway. Now that I have my info from test phase 1, it looks cool, but way too subtle to show up well on camera. I can move on to phase 2. So what I'll do is add foam that's close to my base tone, in this case, pink. Then I'll paint the yarn veins over the top of that surface. So first, I build up Patrick's flabby starfish body by building up and rounding out any hard edges and adding some arms, and I shape out the basic jaw and smooth and blend the edges. Next, I add some yarn veins on the top surface and stick them down with Mod Podge, and then poke and pull them until they look sufficiently veiny. Then I add some legs. I had to cheat the feet a bit. Patrick just has stumps for feet, just like his arms. But I want him to stand up on his own, so he really needs some feet. I bulk out the arms a bit more too, and blend them off, and start adding wrinkles and texture. Next, eyes. I put down some pink foam clay and smush the already dry eyes I made earlier into the clay. I build up around the brows and cheeks and the face starts to take shape. I want him to have a scowl but still be kind of vacant and dead-eyed, which will make that big goofy smile even creepier. Also, he kind of looks like Dr. Zoidberg at this point. I start adding in some teeth from my pre-made teeth box. I shape the clay around the teeth a bit and then smooth and texture it to form the gums. I'll build lips over this once it's dry, so I let it dry. Next, I add the rest of Patrick's pointy head. I use a firm paintbrush and water to blend the edges and then to poke the clay to add a lumpy pore texture. After that, I add a little clay over the teeth to serve as the lips. Then I smooth it with water and a firm brush and shape it a bit and then smooth it a little bit more and shape it a little bit more. Next, the shorts. I make them big and droopy so they cover more of the feet that he shouldn't have. I just keep building up the clay and bulking it out around the legs to form the shorts. I push up the bottom edge to separate the shorts from the leg. I add wrinkles and then smooth it and then add more wrinkles and then smooth it and then add some rips and I smooth that out. Then I use a strip of clay for my extruder to form the waistband of the shorts. I wrap it around and blend off the bottom edge. Then I smooth that edge with the water and brush. I add more detail and wrinkles to the shorts and then let them dry. Once that's dry, I add on the gut that's hanging over the waistband. Same process, shape, smooth, and texture, and repeat as needed. Then I finish with a belly button. I use a weird little dental flosser to add some more detail to the edge of the wound in Patrick's chest. Next, I use a plastic liner from a box of chocolates to make a nice squared shape for the bob bits. I push some yellow foam clay right into this makeshift plastic mold and then texture the inside with a brush and some water. Then I let that dry for about 12 hours, so it's still just a little soft right where it touched the plastic. That lets me shape it a little, so it doesn't look so straight along the edges. And it lets me add in some sponge, holes? I don't know what the... Oh, hey, thank you, science. Pores. It lets me add in some pores to what's left of SpongeBob, and some wrinkles around his eye. Then I let those pieces dry, and once they're dry, I add an eyeball. I use soft clay to make this eyeball because I want it to look big and SpongeBob-y, but I also kind of want it to look a little off and droopy. I shape it and smooth it with water, and then I let it dry. The other eye I decide is going to be popped, like Patrick already took a bite out of it. So I sculpt it all open like a smushed grape. I smooth it out, and then I set it aside to dry. Now, back to my test. I add some more yarn veins to the surface, this time using Mod Podge to stick them on, and then foam clay paste to smooth them down and make them look like they're under a thin layer of skin. As that dries, I poke floral wire through the now dry SpongeBob parts and glue it in place with some Mod Podge, so I can attach them to the arms later. I stick some vein yarn on the back of the eye to make some eye veins, and then I give it a pupil. Now I start painting. Blood red spatter and washes over the whole thing, SpongeBob's parts and in Patrick's mouth, all around the wounds and low points. And don't those veins look awesome? Just a few inches of yarn and some foam clay mixed up with Mod Podge, and look really good. I don't use a base coat because I want you to be able to see these veins, so I use a wash around the eyes and all around the wrinkles. I use a brown wash on the shorts, and then many coats of green, followed by some purple for the flowers on Patrick's shorts. I use a pointy tool to dab some black paint in the middle of the pupil while leaving the rest of the iris blood red. Next, I attach the SpongeBob parts to the arms using the wire. Because it's all foam, it just pokes right through. I trim off the end and glue it in place with some Mod Podge. This lets me position the SpongeBob part at the best angle so it's clear that he's eating what's left of SpongeBob. Next, I paint the teeth a simple bone white. After that, a purple wash over all the low points, the wounds and wrinkles and everything. When that's dry, I add a drop of UV resin to each eye, and then cure the resin with a UV light. It looks great! Then I paint some resin over the wet parts on the wounds and the eye. And I add some to the mouth, so I can stick some little yellow bits in Patrick's mouth, because of course he chews with his mouth open and you're going to see bits of SpongeBob. Then, I lock those in place with some more UV resin and cure it with the light. I mix some resin with some blood color paint and smear it around too. Lastly, I add a little yarn to the piece of SpongeBob and glop on some of this resin and paint mixture until it looks like drippy guts. Then I cure it with a UV light, add a bit more goo and cure it one last time, and then I add a little more goo and cure it again. Then I finally call this one done. And on to the beauty shots. Thanks for checking out my video. Please hit like and subscribe to the Monster Shop for more creepy creatures and crafty creations.